Hello there and welcome to my latest podcast, the last one for 2020. Apart from the ravages of wartime, 2020 will go down as a year like no other. A year of disruption, of chaos, a time for self-reflection, much of it in isolation. From February 2020, I found myself commenting extensively on travel, or our lack of being able to travel, consumer rights and refunds, and what the future holds for travel as a whole. As we approach the end of the year, the focus has changed from COVID-19 to Brexit. In simple terms, the debate has moved from Project Fear to Project Reality, and it is that reality that travel consumers will now have to face. The best way to describe how you will travel from the 1st of January 2021 is by advising you that you will all be travelling in the future as we did back in 1970. Everything that you've taken for granted this past 45 years will disappear overnight, and you will have to rethink all your travel plans and what that means for your journey and expenditure. As I wrote this podcast, I didn't just simply take the government's word for it, because quite simply for the last 10 years they provided gloss and inaction over key or substantial matters. There is a limit to how far we can fudge around the issues. So I've taken my lead from the European Union, who have set out the changes to UK citizens quite starkly and indeed transparently. I'm going to speak very briefly about rights and what should happen to them in the UK. But before I do, I think we need to talk about what we should expect to see and how we should expect to see travel return to normality. At each stage of the COVID journey, travel commentators and bloggers have come out of the woodwork to declare that happy days are here again, when in fact any such optimism has been short-lived. Take for example the announcements at the beginning of December when we all welcomed the news of the vaccines. But to read the papers, you'd have thought we could all go out and book that 2 weeks in the sun just in time for Christmas. Then along came the latest COVID variant, and out of control levels of sickness in London and the southeast, and that, as they say, put paid to any notions of a return to normality. Last March, I wrote a podcast about how summer 2020 may not happen, and it was my considered opinion at the time that the earliest we could perhaps get away would be around the end of July. That did happen to an extent, but it was pressured by other countries' restrictions and a general public sense that we should stay at home. As I write this, I see some commentators suggesting that by April the 1st next year, perhaps it was a joke, we would all be returning to some kind of travel normality. I wouldn't go as far as that, because there are major challenges ahead on any vaccination programme, along with the availability of vaccines. I think at the earliest, a return to some form of travel normality will be seen around the end of July and into August 2021. But that will depend on whether the countries want proof of your vaccination and indeed the manner of that proof. It will also depend on whether airlines and tour operators have opened up sufficient capacity, for example. That's my immediate prediction. I don't actually expect to see a wide-ranging travel normality until the end of 2021 and perhaps into the first quarter of 2022. So before any thoughts of Brexit, you should gird yourself for a few more staycations, perhaps. But a word or two about consumer rights. From 11 p.m. on the 31st of December 2020, all European consumer laws and rights do not apply to the UK. However, the UK government promised that they would incorporate all consumer laws into the UK statute books. So whilst we may have some certainty concerning our travel rights, we should prepare for the likelihood that these incorporated laws will be watered down. Now, I expect to see this take place in the next 12 to 18 months, and there will be a need for all consumers to check and double check all consumer rights and laws before they travel. If, however, you buy travel products from an EU-based travel provider, the likelihood is that you will be able to rely on EU laws and enforcement procedures. But again, you need to check those laws, the company's websites in particular, and also their terms and conditions. But getting away in this era of Brexit is very simply returning 21st century holidaymakers back to the time of 1970, when we were all familiar with travel obligations, which are now viewed as being restrictive from the 1st of January 2021. The principal restriction comes in the form of passports. You will no longer be able to enjoy the travel freedoms enjoyed by other European citizens, because the wording on the top of your current passport has been negated by Brexit. Your burgundy-coloured passport will, however, remain valid until its expiry date. But you will have to ensure, however, that your passport was issued for 10 years and that you have at least 6 months validity on your passport when you arrive at your destination. Now, when it comes to arrival at your destination, this will be different because up until the 31st of December 2020, you've been able to follow the EU passport sign. That now ends. You will have to join the other passports queue. Your passports should be stamped, and you should prepare yourself for questions about the purpose of your stay and demonstrating that you have a return ticket and sufficient funds to manage your stay, and whether you have adequate health and indeed travel insurance. None of this should surprise you, because that is how we have treated other passports when they have arrived in the UK. You should expect to experience delays while you enter your destination, but it is entirely possible that popular holiday destinations may create a different queuing system for UK passport holders. My next area concerns entry and visas. As part of the new restrictions, UK holidaymakers will be limited in the amount of time that they can stay in a destination, and indeed within the European Union. So for many holidaymakers, this is not key because their visits are limited to long weekends or the customary 2-week summer holiday. Restrictions on stays will affect students, for example, and retired persons, both categories normally taking advantage of the long periods they can stay outside of the UK. It may also affect second homeowners if they do not hold a European citizenship. The rules are quite simple. On entry to an EU member state, you will be permitted to stay there for 90 days in any period of 180 days. Crossing over the border to another EU member state will not restart the clock. If you breach the rule, you could be fined and barred from re-entry for up to 12 months. Another issue on the horizon concerns the new EU visa, the ETIAS. This is not due to come into force until 2022 and is very similar in construction to the US ESTA visa system. The ETIAS will be required for all members of the family or a party visiting an EU country and is estimated to cost around €7 and will last for 3 years. As a UK citizen, you will have to ensure that when the ETIAS system comes online that you apply for the visa, otherwise you will not be able to travel. As the UK is now about to become a third-party country, I would recommend that UK citizens take photocopies of their passports when travelling. They should carry a copy of their passports when visiting EU countries, leaving the original document in the hotel safe. Holidaymakers should expect that they may be stopped and asked to produce identity documents. The photocopies will help you to mitigate what could be a difficult and indeed an unfamiliar situation. If this happens, keep calm, understand that rules have changed, and above all, remain polite at all times. Health is my next subject, and this has been the principal area of my concern ever since the referendum. The commentary up until Christmas Eve has been firmly focused on the UK holidaymakers losing access to this valuable benefit. But let's remember, access to healthcare was with us through various schemes, notably the E111 form, which allowed access to treatment or a refund for medical treatment received back in the 1970s. As the EU developed, the European Health Insurance Card, or the EHIC card, was introduced, which allowed for a more efficient access to healthcare whilst on holiday. The trade agreement has extended access to that scheme. So, under the trade agreement, treatment for serious pre-existing medical conditions can go ahead at your destination with prior agreement. And please make sure you get that prior agreement. Secondly, if you currently hold an European Health Insurance Card, or an EHIC card, which is valid after the 1st of January 2021, then you will be able to continue to use that card if you should need treatment up to its expiry date. Now, I'm publishing the script of this podcast on my website, and I provide very important links which you should print off should you get into any difficulty in your destination, because this is your right under the trade agreement. Now, these provisions will continue for 15 years only, unless the protocol in the trade agreement is in fact extended. Now, the government has already stated that it intends to issue a global health insurance card, or a GHIC, but there is no date when that is expected to be launched. I would also warn you that such a global card is unlikely to be just that, global. If you haven't got a valid EHIC card, and there's no GHIC card available at the time you intend to travel, then you will need to ensure that you have fully comprehensive travel insurance before you travel. You may be asked to produce it, remember, at your port of entry. In any event, whatever the changes, irrespective of whether or not you have an EHIC card, I would strongly recommend that you carry with you full comprehensive travel insurance, just in case there are difficulties in understanding the trade agreement. Driving. Now, there are many holidaymakers who take their cars or caravans abroad each year, giving them flexibility for wherever they intend to stay. But the following needs to be considered. You will need to ensure that your car or caravan has a GB sticker. You should be doing that anyway. Your UK-based EU driving licence will not be valid within the European Union. However, the licence will still be valid in the UK until its expiry. To use the driving licence in the European Union, you will need to obtain an international driving permit, which will accompany your UK driving licence. You will also need to ensure that your car insurance comes with a green card, and this ensures that your UK domestic car insurance is extended for your visits in the European Union. Animals. This is a highly contentious area, and is one that is bound to attract misunderstandings and mistakes. It is estimated that some 250,000 Britons take their pets abroad each year when they go on holiday, so it's important to understand some important key changes. Now, firstly, the Blue Pet Passport and the scheme that accompanied it will cease to exist for UK citizens at 11 p.m. on the 31st December 2020. A new regime exists whereby no less than 10 days before you intend to travel, you have to obtain an Animal Health Certificate, or an AHC. The AHC is valid for 10 days for entry either into the European Union or Northern Ireland. The AHC is valid for 4 months in the EU and, importantly, is valid for 4 months after issue for re-entry with your pet back into the UK. Your animal must be microchipped. Your animal must be vaccinated against rabies. The minimum age for rabies vaccination is 12 weeks. If vaccinating for the first time, you have to wait 21 days before you can travel. To get your AHC, you have to prove that your pet has been microchipped and be able to show your animal's vaccination history or records. There are extra health requirements if you need to get for your dog if you intend to visit Finland, Norway, Malta, the Republic of Ireland, or indeed Northern Ireland. When you arrive at your destination, you will have to pass through a traveller's point of entry, or a TPE, and produce your original AHC, proof of microchipping, vaccinations, and any other treatment required. You will need to have a new AHC for each new trip you take into the EU. You will not be able to use your previous AHC. On returning to the UK, there are currently no new health requirements, but you will be expected to produce your AHC if you are a returning UK citizen from your holiday. There are other requirements for non-UK citizens. Note the UK will accept the EU pet passports from visiting EU citizens. Costs. One aspect rarely discussed is the question of increased costs. For many years, the UK's pound has been resting within the relatively sheltered waters of the Eurozone area. As a third-party country, we should start to expect to see the UK pound becoming subject to fluctuations of the market, and we've already seen that since the referendum, and indeed from currency speculators. When you purchase a travel product, you're relying on the travel company having effectively hedged their bets on purchasing fuels or hotels at a rate that is advantageous to the deal that you are going to make with them. As the pound's rate will fluctuate, you should expect to see those fluctuations vary the prices we pay, not just for the holiday, but also for what we can afford in the resort. I've already carried out an estimate as to what to expect in the prices you'll pay for your holiday in the future. Now, whilst there is some current consumer protection that helps with big increases, I've nonetheless predicted that for a family of 4, for example, mum, dad and 2 kids, they may have to pay an extra £840 for the same holiday they could have bought for less in 2016. You'll be able to see my breakdown of how I've calculated that on the link attached to the script on my website. Roaming charges. Very important as we all take our mobile phones abroad. There is no comfort here because the trade agreement makes no provision for these to continue, apart from an aspiration, that indeed they will. Some companies have apparently stated that they will continue with roaming charges, but this may be accompanied with extra charges outside of the membership of the European Union. You need to check with your mobile telephone provider before you travel. Duty free. Oh dear. I was groaning as I was writing this and now reading this during this podcast. Some are celebrating the return of duty free. We live in such an interconnected world, it is likely that we can secure better deals online than what we can find at airports. In my view, the debate on duty free is utter nonsense, particularly as UK citizens are being used to their virtually unlimited limits. I don't intend to spend too much time on this, save to say, check your in-flight or travel magazine because these should provide you with the details of the up-to-the-minute limits. I would give, however, one word of caution. From the 1st of January 2020, if you bring more than £380 of goods back into the UK, you will have to pay duty on them. Excuse me. No more buying that ring or watch you fancied. So you need to take real care about what you bring back into the country, particularly with those extras. So my concluding thoughts are these. These are the points that you need to bear in mind. You should research them beyond this podcast and check and double check on your travel obligations. There are other issues that concern me about the nature of aviation regulation and indeed flight safety. But that is a topic for another podcast you'll be relieved to hear. Travel was never meant to be like this. Back in 1970, it created a buzz, an excitement that you were heading off. But we've all moved on, and have different expectations of the world around us. These changes won't add anything to the holiday experience, just irritation and extra costs. But as with all things in life, the changes we are about to experience as UK holidaymakers are circular. One day, we'll return to the 21st century. Until then, until the next time I podcast, I wish you all a very happy and safe new year. Take care.